Hello, I'm Frederick Dove. Welcome to Havering College and to Havering Asks 2015. Promoting among students here in North East London an awareness of current affairs and, importantly, of the value of debate in a pluralist society, that is the aim of this event today. In addition, on a practical level, Havering students are getting hands-on experience of working in areas such as live television production and event management. Over the next hour or so, our panel will take questions from a live and hopefully lively audience composed of students from Havering College and other local schools. If you are watching via the live stream, you too can tweet comments and questions via hashtag Havering Asks. That's hashtag Havering Asks. Let me now introduce our guests. In next year's London Assembly elections, Ivana Bartoletti will be standing for Labour in Havering and Redbridge. Ivana works for the NHS, sits on the Executive Committee of the Labour Movement for Europe and chairs the Fabian Women's Network. Originally from Italy, Ivana became a British citizen this year and says she is passionate about London, which she has made her home. Environmentalist Craig Bennett has been involved in many campaigns, such as against fracking or to protect our disappearing bees. This year, he was appointed Chief Executive Officer of the campaign group Friends of the Earth. He's keen to take environmental causes out of a, quote, white middle-class ghetto, make them more relevant to other sections of society. Craig is one of two local boys on the panel. As a toddler, he went to the day nursery here at Havering College. Welcome back, Craig. And I gather you do not like white, warm wine.
No.
We might find out why later. Rania Hafez is a senior lecturer in education and community studies at the University of Greenwich. She's British Lebanese and the founding director of the network Muslim Women in Education. And she's a fellow of the Muslim Institute, which aims to promote pluralism and creativity and encourage open debate on issues involving Islam and Muslim communities. Since 2001, Andrew Rossendale has been the Conservative MP for Romford. In Parliament, he sits on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. He wants the UK to leave the EU and is also particularly interested in issues relating to the Commonwealth, the British monarchy, and teaching British history in schools. Among his other interests are the British flag and animal welfare, two passions he combines by having a Union Jack waistcoat for his pet dogs. This is not just a rumour, this is true.
Absolutely true.
Absolutely true. Andrew is also very much a local boy. He was a student here when it was a technical college. So welcome back to you too, Andrew.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our panel. Now, we'll try and get as many questions in as possible, but let's have the first one.
Lucy Mason, President of the Havering Students' Union. Malala has said, with guns, you can kill terrorists. With education, you can kill terrorism. Do you agree?
Malala Yousafzai, for anybody who doesn't know, is the Pakistani schoolgirl who was shot by the Taliban, nearly killed, should have died, didn't, survive miraculously, came to Britain for treatment, has recovered, has won the Nobel Prize, is a role model for many people. She said many things, but among them she said, with guns, you can kill terrorists. With education, you can kill terrorism. Right, let's go round the panel. Craig, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I think Malala's absolutely right. The evidence is very clear. Yes, of course, guns can kill terrorists, and terrorists can use guns to kill hundreds of innocent people as well. But actually, if we want to kill terrorism, if we want to stop terrorism, we've got to look at the root causes as to what drives it in the first place. And we've got to be really clear about the methods that will work to address terrorism. If you look at the root causes of the conflict in Syria at the moment, for example, how did it really kick off starting? Well, you can trace it back very clearly to the war in Iraq that was led by the US and Britain in the first place. That created the conditions that led to the creation of ISIS. You can also look at a proceeding of the National Academy of Sciences paper published earlier this year that showed that a 5-year drought in Syria caused by climate change also led to a great instability and unrest and has been seen to have been a contributing factor, not the cause of the rise of ISIS, but a contributing factor as well. So when we look at that context that's led to the rise of ISIS and the terrorism that stemmed from that then we feel so tragically in Europe and Paris just recently, it's absolutely clear that guns or indeed bombs won't solve terrorism there. They will perhaps exacerbate the situation and make it even worse. We need to have a much smarter response to these kind of world challenges. We have to understand that they're multifaceted, and we have to really address those root causes by trying to make society a much more stable place. And I think although David Cameron won the vote in Parliament this week, what was very clear evidence to me that he'd really lost the argument was when he started calling people, in what is a very complex issue, and we should respect opinions on all sides of this debate, but when he started calling people that opposed bombing of innocent people in Syria, when he calls them terrorist sympathisers, to my mind he might have won the vote, but he lost the argument.
Ivana Bartoletti.
Well, first of all, Malala is a wonderful, wonderful role model for all of us, and particularly for a younger generation. She's absolutely brilliant. And of course, how true that is. Education is absolutely important to me. I would like to live in a place where we say for every pound that we spend on defence, on army, on security, we spend £1 on culture and on education. Because education is absolutely important. And if we look at what happened in Paris, then what we see is actually those terrorists, most of them were French citizens and Belgian citizens, but what they wanted to attack was our lifestyle. Young people enjoying a night out, a Friday night out, and having fun, having a nice time. So education is crucial because it means that we really create those bonds that hold our communities together and educate the next generation of young people like what you're doing here. So I completely agree with that. Now, to fight terrorism is a very complicated thing that we have to do. And it encompasses many different things, which is soft power, diplomacy, military. But I do believe that the most important thing is education, education, and education.
But what do you do when you live in an area where if you send your daughter to a school because you're adamant that she should get an education, somebody might try and put a bullet in her brain?
Absolutely.
What do you do then?
What you do if
What do you do as a parent? Do you still force do you still put your child through education even if you know it could threaten her life?
No, absolutely, I agree. I agree that, it's difficult, but we have to fight for education for all. And particularly around the world, it really shows how important it is for young girls. And this is why Malala was speaking like that, how important it is for women in particular. But it's true, education is the best solution to make sure that we all are in it together as a community, as a country.
Andrew Rossendale.
Well, of course, if you want education and if you want to live in a decent country, in a free society, you have to defend it. History shows that if you defend your freedom and you protect your freedom, you can then bring up a generation of people that want to believe in good and the right values to live by. We live in a better society because of it. You can't appease terrorism, and you can't appease those who seek to take away the freedom that our forebears have fought so hard to defend. Our democracy in this country is not and should not be taken for granted. It's something that we've had to fight for. And of course, education is vital, but we've only got the education we have today because we fought for our freedom in past generations. So you do need strong defence, you do need strong security, and you do need weapons to protect our people and the safety of British citizens, both here in the United Kingdom and around the world. We in this country have a proud record of standing tall when our freedom has been threatened, when people are being butchered, as we see today, and when democracy is under threat. Britain stands firm and defends the right values that our country has always stood by. And that is why it is vital that we don't go down the route of appeasement. We don't go down the route of thinking we can take all these things for granted. We have to defend what we have.
Would you also, though, see education as a means of getting at the root causes of what threatens?
Who can disagree with that? You have to educate people about the right values, about our traditions and why they work so successfully in this country, why we've had such a long history of rule of law, of democracy, of parliamentary traditions that have been adopted all the way around the world. Actually, we've got a proud history in this country, but it's only by educating people about it will people value what we've got and then want to defend it.
Before I go on to Rania Hafez, if you have a point you'd like to make, do put your hand up. It gives me a sign that I don't just throw a question into the room and nothing will come back. But if you have a question, a comment, please indicate it to me. I will try and come to you. But Rania Hafez.
Malala was right, of course. Guns and bombs kill terrorists, but they also kill a lot of innocent people. And we can't forget the hundreds of thousands of Iraqis who were killed in a war that really was completely illogical, unfounded, and we have lived to know, to see, to actually experience the result of that foolish war in the Middle East. But yes, of course, education is important, and it doesn't just kill terrorism, it enlightens the mind. Education, and you are all here students, is really something you need to engage with in terms of what is it for, what are the aims of education. Education is about developing the citizen, and the citizen I want to develop is one who has deep knowledge of history. Of course, we need to know all history, our history in Britain, the history of others, because we can learn from history. But we also need to learn more. Science, as Craig alluded to before, so we can understand the world around us. But we also, to do that, we need two other things. One is freedom of expression and freedom of thought. And these are absolutely vital to maintain in education, but also we need to have critical thinking and understanding. We need to know how to use that knowledge, how to engage in debate and discussion. And we don't want just to go out there and give it to those underdeveloped and mad people abroad who are trying to kill us. Yes, we need the freedom of expression and thought in all education systems, but we also need them here in our education system. I am very concerned about the kind of lack of understanding, the ideas that are verging on racism in some parts, the lack of knowledge of the world around us that are here in our education system. And I speak to you as a senior lecturer in education. I have been teaching young people like you, I have been teaching your teachers, for several decades right now. And what I want to see is our education system enlightening our minds so we understand our world, so we can go out there and make a real difference. I want to see freedom of expression and freedom of speech across our schools, our colleges, our universities, and only then can we go out to the rest of the world and actually tell them about our values, universal values we can all agree to, we can all fight for, and we can all be proud to say these are our values.
When you look around the world, do enough Muslim women have access to education?
As a fact, no, but that's not because of the religion. You can look at different parts of the world. So there are parts where there is a great poverty, and the lack of educational access is to do with poverty. Certainly there are places where it's not just to do, not just Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, people of other faiths, Christians, even parts of Africa, where there is no access to education. So just to put the term Muslim in front of women is actually misleading.
I will point out you're the founding director of Muslim Women in Education.
I know, but I do that because it's a network for professional women to engage in the idea of rebuilding knowledge in education, not just faith in education. I'm very interested in faith. I'm interested in education and faith. But when I say faith and education, I don't mean about people having, prayer rooms. I mean actually believing in the power of education and fighting for education. Not just qualifications, not just papers, not just somebody who indoctrinates you. You have to be careful. You have to stand up to those in power who are trying to indoctrinate your minds. And you have to have the knowledge to actually fight back with your speech and your expression.
It's a huge subject, of course, and we could bounce around here for a little bit longer, but I think I want to go to the second question, which relates to this. It's something, obviously, post-Paris attacks. The second question comes from... Sorry, can you just repeat that for the microphone?
Joe Impet, Royal Liberty School. Should we expect an attack like Paris in London?
Thank you, Joe. Should we expect an attack like Paris in London? Ivana, you've made this city your home. And clearly very happy here. Do you feel threatened? Do you feel nervous?
Well, it's a very tricky question in terms of, we hope not. But of course, what we've seen not just in Paris, but what we've seen happening across the world really shows that we are a risk. And that's why it's important that we do what we can in many different ways to prevent this from happening. In Britain, this means that our intelligence needs to be ready for this. It's important that we share information across Europe, for example, and we do a lot of intelligence work and anti-crime work to make sure that we're ready in terms of we're doing all what we can do to monitor the situation. Of course, in order to tackle this, resolving the situation in Syria is absolutely important. And to do that, there is a number of things that we need to do. Of course, you know, there's been a vote in Parliament for military action for airstrikes. There is also soft power and diplomacy that we need to use. We need to talk and work together with other European countries, like particularly after what happened in France. We need to work together with other, with Russia. We need to work together with Turkey. There's a lot that we can do on an international level, on a diplomatic level, to make sure that we look at the root causes in Syria and across the world where the problem arises. But we also have to look inside us, in here, and make sure that so we have all the tools in place to make sure that what you said doesn't happen here in the UK and in our city in particular.
Let me, before I go around the panel, there's an arm up, and I'd just like to hear the contribution. Wait for the mic. There we go.
Vincent Yardley from the Royal Liberty School, and you were saying about preventing, but I've been told that ISIS have said that they're going to bomb us now because we've bombed them.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen what happened in Paris, and it's not just, you know, it didn't happen just in Paris, Vincent. You know, it's happening in, is Vincent your name? Did you say Vincent? Yeah, it's happening everywhere. There are people who live under the threat of terrorism every day in other parts of the world. So, of course, it is a threat, and we have to be careful. So prevention is important, and that's why, for example, I mean, I work in an organisation which is called NHS Counter Fraud and Security, and what we do is we work together with other organisations and we share information. Sharing information, working together with other countries is very, very important, because then we really need to do, our intelligence needs to be really up to this for this game, and it's important that we do that. So we need to do this at home, we need to work with other countries, and we need to solve the situation overseas. And we need to solve the situation in Syria, because Syria has been a major issue. You've seen that in the papers recently. It's been a major issue over the last 4 years.
Let me go around the panel, and then maybe we'll come back to you in a moment. But Rania, this question of should we expect an attack like Paris in London?
We should be prepared. I'm scared, like everybody else. And not just from living in London. I'm also, as Fred, when he introduced me, said, I'm Lebanese British, I'm Lebanese Londoner. I've been living here 33 years in London, but I come from Beirut, and the day before Paris, my hometown, was also attacked by ISIS. And 47 people died, and over 200 were injured. Some of them subsequently died. And when I was in Lebanon over a year ago, ISIS had already infiltrated, and I know there are operatives of ISIS there, as well as other groups. We might not hear of them, because ISIS are so good, unfortunately, at using the media. So yes, I am scared. I'm scared because I take airplanes. I'm scared because of the Russian airplane that was downed over Egypt. There is more fear. But what do? Do we stop our way of life? No, we don't, because then the terrorists will have won. What we have to do is support each other, be more cohesive as a community, but also support our armed services, our police, support the agents of the state who are actually trying to keep us safe. I'm not here to say, no, they are anti-us. No, they're not. So hopefully we put our trust in the forces of law that we have to keep us safe, but we look out for each other. You know, I use the trains, the tubes in London every day, so do my children who live and work in London. I want us all to be safe. So hopefully we are going to be vigilant, but not in a way that excludes anyone else or leads to racist attacks against people. That's one of my worries. We have found that since the Paris attacks, the incidence of Islamophobic attacks have risen in London and in Britain generally. That is sad. That is really, really sad, because it's not, in this case, it's not about religion. We're all potential targets of these terrorists. We all have to be together to make sure that they are defeated.
Craig Bennett?
I mean, clearly we have to be ready to expect terrorist attacks in London. We've had them before, and sadly, probably it's only a matter of time until they will happen again. And as Ronnie was correctly said, you know, this isn't just Paris. This is in the same week as the Paris attacks. There were appalling, tragic attacks in both Beirut and also Baghdad as well. Of course, the ones in Paris get more media attention, but I mean, right around the world we see these kind of attacks. I think there is an important couple of things to say in this, though. First of all, if we let this affect our way of life, then that is really appeasing terrorists. So, you know, none of us are in favour of appeasement of terrorists, so we shouldn't let it change our way of life. And it's worth reflecting there that actually the chances of being caught up in a terrorist attack are so much smaller than many other things that we go on in life that we don't change our way of life about. According to the government, for example, air pollution kills 50,000 people in this country prematurely, and yet we don't see many measures by the government to change our way of life there to deal with air pollution. But an important thing, Andrew was saying there about our proud history of democracy, and he's absolutely right. And I think it's worth reflecting that in Paris right now, there's the climate talks taking place. And last weekend, there was going to be a mass mobilisation of hundreds of thousands of people to call on governments to act on climate change in Paris. And sadly, that was cancelled by the Paris authorities because of that. And I think that's unfortunate. I understand that would have been a complex decision for the security services in Paris. But I mean, the moment you start banning public mobilisations, then you are letting the terrorists win. I will be going over to Paris on Monday. I'll be in Paris the whole of next week to be part of those climate talks. Friends of the Earth will be taking thousands of our supporters to Paris next weekend for demonstrations that we're now doing inside with the support of the French authorities as a way of standing in solidarity with the people of Paris and standing up to terrorists. And that's what we have to do in these circumstances. Yes, the threats are real, but we have to continue on with our way of life and proudly keep participating ever more vigorously than before in democracy.
I'm going to move swiftly on because we'll try and get another question in before the break, but Andrew Rossendale.
Well, I agree with everything that's been said, and the simple answer to your question is yes. Not only do we expect the likelihood of a terrorist attack on the streets of the UK, possibly London or anywhere, it could happen at any place, to be honest. Not only do we expect it, we've already had it. Of course, remember 7/7, 10 years ago, when the bombs were let off on the Underground and one of the buses as well, and over 50 people were killed on that terrible day. Only a couple of years ago, we had the incident of Lee Rigby being murdered at Woolwich by a young person who had been indoctrinated. He was a Christian, but he was indoctrinated. He actually came from Havering. He lived in Romford, and yet he killed Lee Rigby. So there are already incidents that have taken place, and I would like to put on record my thanks to our security services, because they do a magnificent job in preventing terrorist attacks from taking place. There are lots of attacks that would have occurred had it not been for the incredible job that our security services do to prevent these from happening and finding the people before they actually commit those evil acts against innocent people.
It's obviously a huge issue of our time. We could spend the whole hour, I think, on this topic, but I will move on because I want to get one more question in. Let's have our third question.
Hi, I'm Ryan Carter from Havering College, and I'm a games design student. What's the most you'd pay for a plastic bag?
Okay, just in case you didn't hear that, thank you, Ryan, for the question. A Havering student there. The question is, what's the most you would pay for a plastic bag? I know it's a very different topic. 5p, if you're not careful, in a shop now, since the new rules came in. Craig, surprise, surprise, Friends of the Earth, I'm going to start with you. How much would you be prepared to pay for a plastic bag?
Well, it depends on the circumstance, doesn't it? If you get caught out and you have to do an emergency shop on the way back from the station, you don't have a bag on you, then you'd be prepared to pay quite a bit. But if you're going to the shop and you've been planning to go to the shop, then you should take your bags with you so that you don't have to pay. So it's as simple as that. I mean, obviously what's behind this question is the levy that's come in recently of 5 pence for a plastic bag, and that's something that Friends of the Earth campaigned for very vigorously. We campaigned for it first in Wales, and we won it there in Wales, and it's been operating there for 5 years. And actually what it's done is it's cut plastic bag use by around 90%. It's proved incredibly popular. 3/4 of the Welsh population, 5 years after it's been in place, strongly support it. The vast majority of businesses and retailers strongly support the plastic bag levy. And did you know that it's estimated by the government that this levy will actually save the public purse £800 million a year as a result of this? But at a time when we're trying to cut public expenditures...
How is the cost?
Because of the cost of local authorities and government agencies having to clear up the litter of billions of plastic bags.
So it's not the money raised, it's the money saved in not clearing up.
The money raised is a different thing. But actually, this plastic bag levy, by cutting the use of plastic bags and cutting the billions of plastic bags that litter all around our country, and particularly on our coasts, this will save local authorities across this country and central government agencies around £800 million in clearing it up. One startling statistic I'll give you of seabirds. If you look at seabirds around our shores, 93% of them, if they're dissected, contain plastic in their stomachs at the moment. This is the only thing that's been wrong about this levy on plastic bags is that it's taken far too long for England to introduce. Other countries have had it for years. If you ever watched Friends in the 1990s, you'd be familiar that New York has had it for decades. Plastic bags, the British and the English love affair with plastic bags is really quite bizarre, and it's been long overdue that we bring in such a levy.
Ivana, let me come to you. Let me put a spin on the question. Not just, how much would you be prepared to pay for a bag, but what do the Italians do?
I was going to say that because my view on this is that it's a great thing to do, to introduce them. Because I went to when I was your age, I was living in Italy, and then I went to university in Germany for a bit. And both countries, they have that. People pay for their plastic bags. People recycle their bottles of their glass bottles, and it actually gradually it does change the attitude that we have, because then you start bringing.
Like Craig
your
said,
own,
you go out prepared.
Exactly, your own. You start bringing your own bag when you go shopping. And at the beginning, people say it's a bit annoying, isn't it? But then it changes the public attitude, which is what we want really. So when I was in Italy, I remember that I was your age, and that's what we had to do. And I remember that we as students, we used to have when we our plastic bags or other kind of bags in with us and use them. So I think it's a very simple thing. I agree, it's taken a long time to introduce. It's a very simple thing, and it saves a lot, so it's great.
Andrew,
well, there's nothing
5p enough?
There's nothing to disagree about, really. I think clearly a plastic bag costs money to produce. We are consumers. We want to use the plastic bag. We should pay the cost of that bag, and obviously it's an incentive for us to only take bags that we're going to use and not just take. I mean, before we would just take as many bags as we want without thinking about it. Now we have to pay a small amount, and so you think, do I need that bag? And what Craig has said is absolutely right. It's going to save money in terms of not clearing up all these plastic bags that are floating around our streets and countryside and shores. I mean, this is just common sense. So I'm happily in favour of that.
Apologies for going off on this tangent, but as a dog owner, when you go for walkies, does it apply to those bags?
Well, I mean, you use whatever bag you want to use, don't you? So, I mean, if you take your dog for a walk and you need to clear something up, then you can take one of the 5p bags that you've purchased the day before. You can use them.
It's worth it.
They
for
can
the,
be
for
used
the love
for two
the dogs
purposes.
give you, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Before I go to Rania, I just want a show of hands briefly. You in this room here, just a show of hands, put your hand up if you think 5p for a plastic bag is perfectly okay because of what it represents.
That's great.
That's very encouraging, Craig, I would say. The next generation is fully on board.
Yeah.
Rania.
I'm afraid you're going to boo me out of the room, and Craig is going to hit me in a minute because I'm against it. And the reason I'm against it, is because when I go to my local Morrison's, I shop at Morrison's, sorry, maybe I'm supposed
Other
to say that.
supermarkets are available.
At my local supermarket, there's a big sign that says, the money that is raised will be given to charity. I don't need to be, I don't need to give 5p to Morrison's for them to decide which charity to support on my behalf. I wouldn't have a problem if I was actually paying for the value of the bag. But in this case, it is a kind of a stealth tax that is trying to make us virtuous, whereas virtue has to be an act that you actively and consciously engage in. And I speak as a person of faith. The same way I wouldn't want to force my faith on anyone or force anybody to pray or fast or do anything, because there's no virtue in forcing people to do an act of virtue. There's no virtue in it in actually forcing people. So if supermarkets want to charge the value of the bag and actually take that money, that is far more transparent.
So it's not the 5p you complain about, it's the fact that you're supposed to be virtuous about it.
Well, the fact that I don't want them to charge me money so they can give to charity. If I want to give to charity, I'll give to charity.
So you'd rather Morrison's...
Rania, what the alternative is?
Okay.
The alternative is the money raised goes to the central government, which then they use to pay for bombs.
I'd rather it goes to central government, because they, at the end of the day, we are in a democracy, we've voted for the government, and they are accountable to us.
Okay. Right.
And that's my view on that. So I'm talking in terms of liberty. I'm actually, funny enough, a libertarian. And I believe in individual liberty, and I believe that when it comes to this, it's up to the individual to support charities when they wish. I don't wish to be forced to do it behind my back. Yes, I will pay the cost of the bag, and tell you the truth, I have a handbag which is not leather, it's plastic, and costs £200. So sometimes I can pay a lot for a plastic bag.
Before we go to the break, some arms up in the audience. That young chap there in the second row, please. Hang on, just wait for the boom mic to get to you. Sorry, the next one along. Sorry, well, just go along.
And I'm from the Royal Liberty School. I agree on your decision of plastic bags that it should cost 5p. I've been to Tesco before, and they've increased the quality in the plastic bags. So if they increase the quality in plastic bags by making it thicker, isn't it a bit bad, because people still forget to bring plastic bags, so it would pollute a bit more.
So the bags are thicker now because people are paying for them. Craig Bannett, doesn't that kind of negate the environmental benefit?
Well, the idea is that they're bags that last, and people then use them several times. That's the idea.
So you can, it's better for recycling.
But it will be important to monitor, how public companies behave and respond to this over the next year ahead. I'd like to see more companies introduce bags for life that aren't made out of plastic and instead made out of recycled paper and so on, as again we have in many other countries.
Right. That's where I'm afraid we're just going to have to take a short break, but do join us again in a few minutes.
August 18, 2012.
I'm tired. No, I think I'm losing my mind.
I'm on my way home alongside Regent's Canal, and there's blood everywhere. I can't see much. There's something in the water.
Found my next victim. Her name is Sarah. seems to be getting easier as days go by. It seems so sweet and innocent, but I know what they deserve. No else have caught wind from my misgivings yet, and no one ever will. I'll see to it.
I don't want to point any fingers, but a couple of them evidence bags have gone missing. Okay, I've got an idea what we can do.
This won't stop me. I will kill again.
Welcome back to the second part of Havering Asks 2015. I'm Frederick Dove. With me here at Havering College is a panel of guests answering questions from an audience of local students. We'll try and squeeze more questions in during the second half. The first half was very interesting, but we'll try and get it in before the half hour is up. So let's take our next question, which comes from...
School. I have the question, is apprenticeships better than going to university?
The question is, are apprenticeships better than university? So obviously, a question that kind of harks at university fees. Let's go around the table rather quickly. Craig, apprenticeships versus university?
I think that all depends on the individual. I think both are incredibly valuable. Clearly, university is a fantastic thing for many people to do, as that kind of education that absolutely takes them through into sort of adulthood and sets them up for the rest of their career. But apprenticeships will suit many people much better, and apprenticeships are something that absolutely gives that sort of on-the-work training that is so valuable for many people. We have some apprenticeships at Friends of the Earth and paid internships and so on. And these are, it's really exciting to see young people coming in and learning how to campaign, learning about politics, learning how to influence people. Incredibly exciting. So I would say, you can't say one's better than the other. I'd say both are really valuable, and it's important, young people consider both those options and choose the ones that's best for them.
Rania.
They should be equivalent. They should be the same. They should have parity of esteem. They should have the same value. Unfortunately, no government to this date has really invested enough in our apprenticeships. So it's not like the apprenticeships you get in Germany or in other countries in Europe, where you are actually given the depth of knowledge, the real support from employers, the support from local colleges to actually really develop your skills and your knowledge, so you have a background that is really marketable in the future. I feel that we have failed our young people when it comes to apprenticeships, and I worked in further education for over 15 years, and I taught teachers for FE, and I really wish I could say, yes, they are the same. And unfortunately, we're doing the same to our universities. We are starving them of funds the same way we have done with our apprenticeships. So apprenticeships and universities should be equivalent. They should have the same value, but we should invest in them more, not just in terms of money, but in terms of the knowledge needed. Young people need a solid background of knowledge before they go out into the world. And just to say, we're going to teach you a few skills and then go out and get the job is really selling you short.
Rania, let me just ask you something, because you work in tertiary education. Do you sometimes have, no names please, but do you sometimes have students in front of you who would have done better at 18 or at 19 getting an apprenticeship rather than spending 3 years at an educational institute?
No, because I don't think it's different. I don't think you need different skills for them.
But are some people better suited to one than the other?
I don't think so, because there are different pathways. A university education should be more about the intellectual development of the individual, and anyone should be able to enter into it. Apprenticeship should be about both the intellectual development in a particular vocational discipline, supported by practical skills. We don't have the kind of apprenticeship that I would send any young people to, frankly. I wish we did. And I would like to see a government that's really committed to really supporting a strong knowledge base of apprenticeships and forcing companies to really provide proper apprenticeships where young people are actually properly rewarded for the time and effort they put into them.
Ivana?
Well, I think there's a problem with both. I mean, the problem with apprenticeships is that there's not enough of them. And sometimes they're not what they should be. And so I would like to see much more of them, so there is much more of a choice. And a lot of businesses should offer real, high-quality, paid apprenticeship for young people. So there's a problem with that. And there is a problem with university because it costs too much money. And I'm afraid that, you know, £9,000 a year to go to university is a joke. It's too expensive. And particularly if you live in London and, you know, you've got a family living in London and you're paying a lot on housing, and then you've got young people to put through university, it's too expensive. And I see, unfortunately, when I take my 10-year-old son to school, I see that in the morning that the parents tell me, how am I going to get my son or my daughter through university? It's not good enough that people have got to pay so much money and they have to start their working life with huge debt. So we need to make sure that there are more apprenticeships for young people, and we need to make sure that university and college is more affordable for people. And there's no one is better than the other ones. It depends on what you want to do as a student, as a young person, but you shouldn't be forced into one or the other because of how much money your mum and dad have got in their bank account. To me, that is the most important thing.
Andrew, let me put a spin on this for you. For the British economy, are apprenticeships better than university, or does it not matter?
Well, let's get back to the basic reason why someone goes to university or someone takes an apprenticeship. It's because it gives you the training you need and the knowledge and the ability and the skills that you need to go out into the real world, to work and to earn a living so you can provide for yourselves and your families. Now, for too long, particularly under the government of Tony Blair, everyone was told everyone's got to go to university. Nobody was concerned about the cost, where the money was coming from to pay for all these universities and all these university places. Neither was it emphasised the importance of going to university for a purpose. So people just went just to tick a box. Far too many people, even now I think, far too many people are going to university just because it's the thing to do, not because it's actually necessarily going to lead to a good job at the end of it. Too many people go to university and they finish up not getting a good job at the end of it. They don't study the right things that's going to lead to employment and a career path for them when they finally leave. So that's right that the current government have re-emphasised the importance of apprenticeships and have brought them back, and tens of thousands of young people are now getting the opportunity of real apprenticeships, which are going to lead, hopefully, to good jobs. But at the end of the day, whatever we do when we leave school and college, whether we go to university, whether we do an apprenticeship, whether we go into the armed forces, or whether we go into a family business, whatever we do, it's up to us to make the best of our lives. It's up to us to work hard. It's up to us to incentivise ourselves. It's no good sitting here and saying, well, the government should provide this and they should give us that. That's not the way the world works.
Isn't the government now talking of, if you want to join the police force, they're talking of making that a degree level career?
Well, absolutely.
But that's pushing people back into university.
Well, I think that it depends how you analyse these things. But I think that far too many young people have been going to university which haven't been leading to a proper career at the end of it. And I think we do need to provide all sorts, because we're all different. You know, some people are very academically minded, they want to go to university. Others are not so, they're more practically minded, want to do practical things. And there's nothing wrong in that. We're all different. We're all made differently. We've all got particular skills in different directions. So we need to try to provide a multitude of different opportunities for our young people to develop in their own way. But at the end of the day, it's up to us to work hard and to be successful in life. It's not down to the government to provide everything anymore. We have to think for ourselves, provide for ourselves, and be ingenious, because if we are, then we will make something of our own lives, and that's ultimately down to us.
I'm going to press on with the next question. It comes from Erhan Aksu of the Oaks Park School. Erhan.
Erhan Aksu, Oaks Park High School. Should Britain stay in the European Union?
Should Britain stay in the European Union? Rania, I'm asking you, particularly with perhaps also your Lebanese hat on, a kind of different perspective as well as your British hat.
It's a difficult question to answer, and I'm not fudging it because I've been thinking a lot about it. Originally, I was very pro the EU simply because I'm an internationalist. I'm Lebanese, I live in London, I grew up in the Middle East and in the United Arab Emirates. You know, I actually feel like I live without borders. I don't define myself by a particular nationality. And I felt that the European model was actually a good model to follow, that it was bringing people together in the shared values, kind of values that could be seen as universal values. We were taking the borders down. I also believe in no borders. Because I'm a nomad, I've moved around. So I was really very much in support of the European Union. What has concerned me recently is what seems to be the lack of democracy at the heart of the European Union. And I'm thinking in particular about Greece and the problems that Greece faced, and the fact that the power of the banks and the power of financial capital seem to take precedence of democratic rights and the rights of people. So I am now rethinking that. I'm rethinking it because I also believe in the liberty of individuals and the fact that we need to have our decisions made collectively by us. And I don't know how much the European Parliament and the European Union is actually reflecting that collective local decision making. So I'm keeping my options open. I want to listen more to the debate on this, but I'm getting more towards the fact that maybe the European Union is going down the wrong road and maybe it needs to be stopped and redirected again.
So as regards the referendum we might have next year or the year after, you're a floating voter?
Currently, I'm floating more towards the no. I don't want to be in the European Union unless the European Union changes goes back to the origins of what it was supposed to be about, which is about really collective responsibility and democracy.
Craig Bennett.
I think we should stay in the European Union. I think in an ever more globalised world, I think what we need to see is ever more collaboration between countries. There are so many problems that the humanity is going to face in the 21st century that we need to solve through collaboration between different nation states. It won't surprise you that for me one of the top of them is the environment. You know, the environment knows no borders. You can't solve something like climate change by one country acting alone. You have to try and get countries to work together. And the European Union over the many decades has been very effective at introducing environmental legislation at an EU-wide basis that helps us to deal with pollution control issues. And it wouldn't make so much sense to do it just at the issue of the nation state. Now, having said all that, you know, Rani is right on a number of things where actually at times the EU has been really problematic. We've seen on the common agricultural policy, for example, that has not been good for the environment overall. And I have been very concerned how in the last few years the talk of trying to see of the EU just purely as a market, you know, loses the point that it's about a better future for our citizens.
You mentioned the common agricultural policy. Just as an example, can you give an example of where the EU, I mean, waste is one thing that Friends of the Earth probably abhors. Give us an example of the kind of waste that people accuse the common agricultural policy of producing.
Well, the problem about the common agricultural policy is it results in huge taxpayer payments to farmers to produce more food than we need, and that results in food waste. And often that food is being produced in a way that damages the environment. That's the short version of the story. And so that's a real problem where we've not seen the EU acting in the interest of citizens. What we need to do to get the EU back on track is to act in the interest of the people of the Europe, not in the interest of special interest groups or like perhaps one sector like farmers, not just in the interest of business, not in the interest of any one state in particular, but to look at the overall, what's in the interest of the people and citizens of the EU as a whole. And that clearly means protecting the environment first and foremost. I remember when I was a child, you know, it was quite common to see sewage on beaches in Britain. And successive British governments failed to do anything about this, and fortunately, then we had EU legislation that cleaned up our beaches. So, and I really fear that if you don't have that kind of collaboration on issues like the environment that comes about because of the EU, then we will see a worsening life. But we have to get the EU back on track and putting citizens first and companies second.
Andrew Rossendale, I imagine that some of what you've heard you're very much in agreement with.
Well, the reality is that the European Union has been pretty much a disaster for this country.
Apart from the beaches, maybe.
Well, actually, everything that has been mentioned, which is supposedly good about the EU, we could do that in any case, bilaterally, with any country we choose. And Craig has hit the nail on the head. He said environmental issues have no boundaries. So why are we creating an EU boundary? Switzerland is not in the EU, so does the environment affect Switzerland or Norway or all the other countries in Europe that are not in the EU? Of course it does. So what we've got with the EU is a political union. And what that means is that slowly but surely all of the powers are being centralised away from the democratic nation states like the United Kingdom. We are losing control over our democracy, our laws, and our ultimate destiny. At the same time, we're not able to sign trade agreements with countries with whom we've had a long history with. Now, Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister of India, was here only 3 weeks ago to meet Mr. Cameron. Mr. Cameron is not allowed to sign a trade deal with India because we've given up the right to do so. So the Commonwealth can't trade with them anymore. Bilaterally, we have to do a deal only via Brussels. We were told when we joined that it was a common market, okay, about trade. Now, I think most people in this country are happy to have trade with Europe and cooperation with Europe, but we don't have that. We have a political union. So practically half of our laws, I mean, people vote for an MP to make laws, but I can tell you, half of them we don't because they're imposed on us by the EU. So we can't globally cooperate like we would like to do because we're tied to EU laws. And we all know the reality is the EU was a post-war project that Germany and France wanted to create. It's out of date and we've got to go global. And one final thing, Europe is a massively decreasing market. 65% of our trade was with European Union 10 years ago. It's now 45% and dropping massively. Our future markets are the whole world, and that's where we've got to be. While we're stuck in the EU, we will never be able to realise the need to trade globally, and that's going to be important for all of our futures.
Should Britain stay in the European Union?
Well, it's a very relevant question for you guys because it's about your future. And that's the first thing I want to say, is that whether Britain remains part of Europe, or the European Union, is the most important decision that this country will make for a generation. And that's why I really wanted and still want 16-year-olds to take part in that vote, because this is about your future. Now, should we stay in Europe? Yes, we should. And the reason why we should stay in Europe is because we are an out-facing country, because we want to protect British jobs, because we want factories like Nissan that makes cars to continue to invest in this country, because we want to tackle the big issues of today, whether it's terrorism, crime, environment. We want to tackle them together, because to me, Europe is all about achieving together what we cannot achieve on our own as a country. It doesn't mean that we cannot make deals with other countries. It doesn't mean that we cannot go global. It means that there are some issues that we can deal with together with other European countries. And it is about the kind of country you, as a young generation, feel proud to live in. What country? A country which is open to the world, a country that opens up and says there are major things that we need to face together. We face them with other countries. We want to protect jobs. We want to, if we want to, go and study in another country like people do to programs like the Erasmus. They go and study in other universities or in other colleges, which is great, a great thing to do. It's about what kind of country you want to live in. But this is a lot about young people. This is about your future. So do please debate these issues because it's absolutely important. And can I just ask one thing? There are many things that you see about Europe that you don't like. But the answer is not to leave. The answer is to change it. And we can change it if we are all doing this together. Particularly you and young people. You are the ones who can say to Europe and European leaders, starting from David Cameron, going to Angela Merkel in Germany and say, we want Europe to work for people and for young people in particular.
Ivana, let me move on because we want to get one more question in. But very quickly, and I don't want you to indicate how you would vote, but if you were able to vote, if you're younger than 18, would you vote in the European referendum, yes or no? If you could vote. would you care one way or the other how the vote would go? In which case, would you take part? Hands up if you do. Well, so a response there. Don't want to know which way you vote. That's between you and the ballot box if you come to vote. Now, we've got time for another question, and I want to get it in. It comes from Rosetta Sullivan, who is at college here, who is at Havering College here. Rosetta, where are you?
Hi, I'm Roxy Sullivan. I'm a media student. What are your British values?
Just say that again.
What are your British values?
What are your British values? And just to say that educational establishments, schools, colleges have an expectation now that they promote British values, teach the respect of it. They include democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, mutual respect and tolerance of those of different faiths and beliefs. Those are the fundamental. But the question is, what are your British values? Andrew?
Well, I believe that we come from a very proud tradition of peoples. British peoples have created a society which, quite honestly, is the envy of so many countries around the world. We have democracy, we have a stable constitution, we have the rule of law, we have the English language, we have an attitude of tolerance towards everybody. We are more welcoming people from other countries than many other countries would be. We created, and we have created, a commonwealth of nations, of countries that share our values as well, and probably many people in this room have Commonwealth ancestry. So all these things are really important. But the one thing that's kept us stable is the fact that we've had a stable constitutional way of governing this country, headed up by a constitutional monarchy. So our Queen is our head of state, and she prevents governments and politicians from grabbing all the power and doing what they want without any checks and balances. And so when you look at countries like Germany and France and Spain and, Italy and Russia and Greece, I could go on, practically every country in Europe has had wars, bloodshed, civil wars, revolution, Nazism, communism, military rule. Britain's not had that in modern times. We've had a consistent, stable form of parliamentary democracy with a constitutional monarchy, and my goodness, our forebears have fought to defend that in the Second World War, the First World War, and in many conflicts beyond. And we've spread those values around the world, and yet there are still people that want to seem to devalue it and undo it. And I'm one of those people that believe that patriotism is something we should always be proud to be.
We are. Let me push on, but Ivana, I saw you both frown and nod when so your political opponent. You agree
with Andrew. I actually agree with Andrew. Well, I chose to become a British citizen. I was born in an Italian.
And what are your British values?
Well, to me, I chose to become a British citizen because I believe in this country, because I've always thought this country's got a fantastic democratic tradition, because the parliamentary tradition of Britain is wonderful. The value of respect or tolerance and are values that are envied by everywhere in the world. And I chose to become British myself in a wonderful touching ceremony in Hackney Town Hall, together with people from 70 other countries. And what was really touching, I share this video because what was really touching that day was that there were so many young people who wanted to love each other. They were same-sex, wanted to love each other. They were coming from some countries where that was not allowed. And they chose to become British citizens because Britain is such a great country that allows that to happen freely. And I felt so proud at that moment to be with them becoming a British citizen. Can I just add something else?
Very quickly.
There is one institution in this country that I think embodies the British value at its best, to me, is the NHS. So I couldn't be more proud, not just of become a British citizen, but also to be working for the NHS. Because to me, the NHS means it goes at the heart of what British values are all about.
We are like Question Time today. Question Time always has a reference to the NHS.
Yes.
Rania, your answer.
I don't have any British values. I have values that I've gained from my life, from my childhood onwards. I was brought up in a Catholic convent school. So a lot of my values came from Christianity and from seeing Jesus Christ as my role model. Values of sacrifice, of service to others, of loving the poor and supporting others. I also grew in the Islamic faith. I have a lot of values from that. I come from an illustrious family that spans Syria, Lebanon, and Saudi Arabia. The history of my family gives me a lot of values about service to others as well, being, the kind of being part of the community. I traveled, I lived in many countries. I've been living in Britain for 33 years. When I became British citizen 30 years ago, I didn't receive an indoctrinating form that says with your passport you have to believe in these things. The values we have, the values as a society we don't get them from a geographic place. We don't get them from a passport. We get them from engagement with other human beings in our community, with our neighbors, in our schools, in our workplaces. We get them through engaging with questions of morality, of virtue. Philosophy is the way we think and we come to values. Religion is part of philosophy. Any religion, debate, discussion, that's what gives you values. Do not ever believe that a passport or a geography gives you values. Values is what you gain from your engagement with your fellow human beings, and they are universal. And what we have to fight for and promote, and I will do that, is universal values that apply to everyone, and everyone can engage with them and be proud of them.
Craig Bennett, follow that.
Well, I think I would absolutely agree that many of the values that we hold true as British values are also those shared by other countries. But nonetheless, I think ones that are particularly embedded in British culture that are important. One is democracy, absolutely. And we're often called like the birthplace of democracy. But my worry is I often see that under threat at the moment, where we're now seeing changes in voter registration, meaning that tens of thousands of young people might not be able to vote at the next election. Another British value is international diplomacy. And one of the things that really concerns me about the vote to allow bombs in Syria this week is I don't think we've seen enough effort around diplomacy first before bombs on that issue. Another British value is fairness, and yet we're seeing steps at the moment to reduce access to justice for people that need to do that through the courts. Another is an internationalist perspective, and often the attacks around the EU and attacks against refugees and so on seem to mean that we're losing that value of in international Britain. And the final one I would mention is actually something that is very strongly British, is a love of nature and the environment. We have environmental organisations in this country that have memberships many, many times bigger than those of our political parties. And yet this is an issue that I don't think politicians have yet realised just how important this is to British values.
If only we had a second hour, but a week is a long time in politics. An hour is a very short time at Havering College. That's where we have to end Havering Asks 2015 today. My thanks to our panel. Andrew Rossendale, Conservative MP for Romford, Rania Hafiz of the University of Greenwich, Craig Bennett of Friends of the Earth, and Ivana Bartoletti, Labour candidate for the London Assembly. Thank you also to the audience here and to our live stream and on our live stream. And to everyone who sent us comments on Twitter. Apologies if we couldn't get any of your comments in during this short hour. A personal thank you to the team here at Havering College for their hard work behind the scenes. From me, Frederick Dove, and the whole team of Havering Asks 2015. Goodbye.